You.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. You're live with Faye on YouTube. This is a conversation that I'm going to be particularly proud of because of the panel that we've managed to put together. But before we get to the panel, it's nearly August, and more than half of this year is over. And I know a lot of people will be very pleased to know that more than half of this year is over. It's been a tough year for several people, but we have some things to look forward to, like the weekend, which starts tomorrow. But of all of the things that are being discussed right now on mainstream media, including Ayodhya, there's something that deserves more attention than what it has been awarded. And those are comments coming out of China right now. Remember, for a couple of weeks, everybody talked about what was happening at Garhwal Valley and what was happening between India and China on the LAC. And then it sort of faded into the back ends of our newspapers. But what we must realize that on the borders, it has not faded at all. In fact, things are not calmer and not under control. And there does seem to be a strong disagreement that still exists between India and China on what is their territory and what is ours, which is a conversation we're going to have this evening. And it's the kind of conversation that you should listen to with pen and paper in hand, because of the panel that we managed to put together. But let me just take you through what's happening so far. According to the Times of India, the Times of India has quoted sources from the defense sector and sources from the government. They've said that the People's Liberation Army of China is not in the mood to de-escalate and has 40,000 troops in its front and depth areas at the Eastern Ladakh sector, again quoting sources. It also goes on to say that China is not honoring its commitment of disengagement at friction points in Eastern Ladakh and not moving back as per agreed terms during those multiple rounds of talks that happened between our government and at the army level, and with the intervention, remember, of the National Security Advisor a couple of weeks ago. The Times of India has quoted a source saying, and I'm reading out this quote, "The Chinese have not shown any signs of de-escalation as they continue to maintain their heavy troop deployment of almost 40,000 troops, supported by heavy weaponry like air defense systems, armored personnel carriers, and long-range artillery in the front and depth areas." And this is something we should perhaps worry about. Also, on Tuesday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson had stated that India and Chinese troops had disengaged in most locations of Eastern Ladakh, where they've been involved in a standoff for nearly 3 months. This was reiterated on Thursday by the Chinese ambassador to India, Sun Mendong, in a webinar. He said, and I quote, "With joint efforts of both sides, the border troops have disengaged in most localities. The situation on the ground is de-escalating and the temperature is coming down." He might have also meant that literally as we head into the winter. But India's sort of appraisal of the situation was completely different. In response to that comment, Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson of India, Anurag Srivastava, has told reporters in a weekly briefing, and I quote, "There has been some progress made towards the objective, but disengagement process has yet to be completed." So these are the questions that we're going to ask over the next 1 hour. First of all, what is the impact of the new comments coming out of China? If China believes that they have the disengagements already done when it hasn't, what does that actually mean? And we'll have our panelists sort of decode that for us. Secondly, is China really seeking to alter the LAC at this point by sort of drawing out new lines because they're not pulling back beyond a certain point? And finally, what are India's options at this point? Is the option of diplomacy still on the table, and is that the way to go forward? These are the questions we're going to ask and hope to get answers for over the next 1 hour. Joining us right now, Admiral Arun Prakash, former Chief of the Indian Navy, Lieutenant General Ashok Mehta, who's a security analyst, Ajay Shukla, senior journalist, retired colonel of the Indian Army, and among, one could say, the most prolific journalist on the matters of defense in India. And of course, Mr. Mohan Guruswamy, who is an economist and an expert on India-China relations, so at the border and also as far as the economy is concerned. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you for joining us. My first question is obviously, what is the impact of the new comments coming out of China? If I may please start with Admiral Prakash. What does this really mean? If there's still a disagreement between China on whether or not the pullback has really happened and disengagement has really happened, what would you interpret out of this, Admiral?
Well, this looks like a standard Chinese tactics. I mean, you obfuscate the issue, confuse your adversary. And if you look back, if you look at the Chinese build-up, you just rattled it off: infantry, armor, artillery. Obviously, there is air support at the back. How long would it have taken to build up this force level for the Chinese to bring up all this to the Tibetan plateau? Perhaps a few weeks, if not months, while we've been scrambling to respond to their moves. So obviously, this is a well-planned strategic move by China, and whatever they are feeding to the media, etc., is all a smoke screen. So unless we can discern their grand strategy, I'm sure our think tanks are hard at work, MEA and the service headquarters. What is the Chinese grand strategy? What are they after? Unless you can discern that or make some educated guesses, and we just keep scrambling from here to there. I mean, knee-jerk reactions, etc. So all these statements, etc., need to be taken with a huge pinch of salt, because they're obviously trying to keep you off guard, obfuscate the whole issue, and build a smoke screen. So we need to have first need to see through the smoke screen. Secondly, we need to have our own set of strategies, that if they do A, then we will do B, and so on and so forth, which is standard military approach. You do an appreciation of the situation, and you work out the enemy's courses of action, 3, 4, 5, and you work out yours, and then you choose their worst and your best, and so on. So I think the military knows how to look at it. But the way things have been going on so far, I mean, with some part of the government saying one thing and the other saying another, it's a bit confusing, and it's a bit unsettling also. There seems to be a lack of coherence and this controversy. So I think it's best for the government, not a white paper, but at least some kind of statement to say what's happened and what is the general plan of action and what we want to do without spilling any secrets.
Admiral, and this is, I must tell our audience, source-based information saying 40,000 troops on the Chinese side at that border. We know from previous reports in India that we have about 20,000 troops at that border. How difficult is this standoff going to be in the months going forward?
I think you've got other experts who can explain this much better than me, but you don't have to do a head count in these kind of things. We don't have to defend every inch of the border. You have to anticipate what the adversary is going to do, and either anticipate him or strike him with full force where he's weak. So little bit of asymmetry doesn't really make a difference. So 40,000 versus 20,000. If we are more agile, if our decision-making loop is faster, if we use initiative and imagination, even a smaller force can up the ante on us. So I don't think numbers need to worry us, because for us, I think Chinese have an advantage. Their lines of communication are, etc., much better. But for us, the more people we put there, the more soldiers, the way we have to stock for the winter, we have to support them. And this is all very expensive business, and we are economically not very well off. So the leaner we are, the better we will be. But we should exercise our imagination and try and get inside the heads of the Chinese.
General Mehta, I want to ask you about some of the specifics of what it's like really in Ladakh at this time of the year, even going forward into this year. I had a couple of conversations with some officers serving there right now who told me things like, and things that civilians couldn't possibly imagine. Stuff like, we have to keep the vehicles running all night, otherwise the diesel freezes. We have to make sure that everyone has proper kitting, otherwise we lose limbs to frostbite. the machinery, the equipment, the armory needs to constantly be maintained in that weather. What is your reading right now of the situation from what we've heard? Do you also agree, General Mehta, that there needs to be clearer communication from the government to citizens? Or is this really the time for just holding cards closer to the chest?
Yeah, thank you. You asked me two questions, basically. The first deals with the current situation and what the two sides are saying. It seems we are talking of absolutely two different things. And I'm not surprised at all. You didn't need a rocket scientist to tell you that the Chinese were not going to follow the disengagement sincerely. The word sincerely is in quotations. And we got advance information about this from our defense minister, who on 17th July, on a visit to Ladakh and Leh, said that he was not sure whether the talks would produce a positive outcome. And then later, about a week later, the army commander of Northern Command spoke on 25th of July. He is the man who's in charge, General Joshi, who's in charge of the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir and the line of actual control against China. And he said that things are very difficult. This is a very torturous process. It takes time, etc. But we will try our very best to restore status quo ante, which means that the positions or the situation that obtained on 19th April or 5th May would be restored. Well, he said he wasn't sure about that. Now, the ground position, unfortunately, is quite different. The actual ground position, while the Chinese are claiming that disengagement, mark the word, they have not used the word de-escalation. They are saying disengagement from friction points has been completed. Disengagement as understood by them. And they have not at any point used the word restoration of status quo. They have not. They are just talking about peace and tranquility in the border areas. They do not refer to the line of actual control. So they have a different script. We have a different script. We are saying disengagement has not been completed. They are saying it has been completed. And the Chinese have already achieved, you were asking that what are the Chinese intentions? But the Chinese intentions were to push the line of actual control to their 1959/1960 line of actual control perception, which they have succeeded in a large measure, because they have succeeded in disengaging only from Galwan. None of the other places has disengagement been done to the satisfaction of India. In fact, there is no conversation at all on Depsang plain, where they are already 18 kilometers, 15 to 18 kilometers inside. They don't talk about that. The Chinese ambassador at this webinar yesterday gave India a sermon about Galwan, the rights and wrongs. He talked about don't ask for clarification of line of actual control. It will create more disputes. So in other words, he was prescribing to India, don't decouple your economies, don't try and side with the West on Hong Kong, on Taiwan, on Xinjiang. So veiled threats were being administered to us. And if I might add, that the problem has been why we are muddling through this mess is because our negotiating strategy is warped. We have put the cart before the horse. In the negotiating strategy, this the military before the military commanders met, there should have been a high level political engagement where the restoration of status quo ante should have been point number one. And this ought to have been followed by disengagement, de-escalation, and the Chinese are very fond of using this, those who advance first must withdraw first. They have done none of this. On the other hand, they have imposed restrictions on us. They have created a buffer zone and made us withdraw on our own territory. They have put restrictions on patrolling. We can't patrol now in any of these areas before because of these buffer zones, and they themselves have done a doclum. A doclum means that they have pulled back and constructed deep fortifications. A Stratford report of 29th of July gives out these figures of 36 new encampments, 22 new bases, 2 new helipads. These have been constructed by the Chinese a la doclum. So the Chinese dictated agenda for disengagement and de-escalation is following the path that they want to take. And we are now stuck because we have left this to the military commanders and to the WMCC of junior officials. By the way, they were both to meet this week. Today is already Friday. Neither of these has met, nor are there any dates. So you can see what the Chinese are doing, having achieved their objective of altering the status quo, shifting the LAC, digging down. They are just delaying and they are not taking the conversation forward. So they've got us in a bind and they've got us, I can't use that inelegant word, but they've really got us. And unless, in my view, the level of political engagement is rekindled, we are going nowhere. And as to your second question, if you think I should answer it about the living conditions in that high altitude area, I'm ready to do so. But maybe I can do that in the second round, whatever you decide, Faye.
Okay, so I'll come back to that because you put down some very interesting points, and I want to take those points to Mr. Mohan Guruswamy as well. There is a report at the Quint that basically that has been written, let me point out, by a distinguished fellow of the Observer Research Foundation, who basically points out that in Depsang, Mr. Guruswamy, that there are Chinese blockades at Bottleneck and Y Point that have prevented Indian troops from patrolling tens of kilometers of territory that's Indian territory, that we believe is Indian territory, which China may disagree with us. So technically, the de-escalation that we were talking about, or the pushing back or the pulling back of China that we were talking about, hasn't really happened. If I remember correctly, you predicted this. You said this is how China has always behaved. We shouldn't trust them when they say that they're going to roll back. So are you not surprised, or do you expect this to happen?
I'm not surprised at all. And I'm also not surprised that they're asking for more. Previously, the line was the fourth finger at Pangong. But if you look at the map, the readings, the coordinates they've given, they're really talking about finger 2 now. So let alone finger 8, which was our perception of the LAC, they're really saying you have no business north of the Pangong Lake. You hang on to the south, we will hang on to the north, And that's it. And that is the old McCartney-MacDonald line of 1905, which incidentally is the only treaty the Chinese have okayed as far as this border is concerned. Now, elsewhere, they have moved ahead in Galwan. Incidentally, I've been to Galwan but a long time ago. And that point 14 is, we always thought that was part of India. And they were about 6 kilometers ahead of that. Now they are saying not only point 14, but the LAC is in the estuary. That means, the estuary, to all our understanding, is where the river joins, the two rivers join together, that's the estuary. So yesterday Sun Wei-dong said, the estuary is the LAC. Now, they've really got us in a tight position, as General Mehta said, because we are holding on to a sliver of territory from Darbuk to DBO is 230 kilometers. And the sliver of territory is 5 to 10 kilometers wide. No military man. And DBO is not something they want. Even in 62, they didn't take it. We withdrew from DBO, from Daulat Beg Ordi. We were not there. The Chinese didn't go and sit down there. They said, no, you keep it. And DBO is one post. So to defend that one post, to keep it supplied, you might need a couple of brigades to hold that territory. Now, is it worth it? Strategically, you'll have to think about this and, look at somewhere else where you start balancing them off. There are other sectors where you can and do a few things, where there are other dimensions, as I say. There is the big Indian Ocean. There is the air, where you can change the rules of the game. If you want to play that game, or you want a settlement and say, okay, sit with the Chinese and say, where is the border? As far as this Western sector is concerned, what do you want? What can we afford to give you? Or what can we afford to fight for? Now, I'm really worried. I'm not really concerned here because this is of no importance at all. I'm concerned about Tawang. They're looking at Tawang. Tawang is a sliver of tract below which is the Sakteng sanctuary of Bhutan. They have said that Sakteng is also not part of Bhutan. When you look at the map, from Bumla down to the Assam Valley, they're claiming that sliver of territory, like a wedge between Bhutan and Arunachal Pradesh is what they're claiming. So it's opening directly into the Assam Valley. Now, this is something we have to be concerned about because China, mind you, historical position is that our border is as far as Tezpur, the lower Himalayas, and that is lower Tibet. So that is what the Qing courtiers gave the Qing emperor, that drawing, and they have said this is China. So this is not going to end with little Galwan and Depsang and things like that, which are of no large strategic consequence at all. They've got us in a bind. We are hemming and hawing and huffing and puffing. 5 Rafales have come. The whole country is in excitement. But for what? Are you going to kill yourself for a sliver of territory? Or are you going to do something else, somewhere else, of your choice? No, you want to think about this strategically and play this game strategically. You can't just keep sitting there, and saying ki Jyotish kya kehta hai. Jyotish will not say anything. The answer is that you are in a hell of a bind, as General Mehta said. I knew where he was going up to. I thought he would say that. But, but we are in trouble.
No, but are you advocating, Mr. Guruswamy, that we concede some territory in the general interest of...
There is no way you can take it back. I'm saying there's no way you can take it back. They've done to you what we tried to do in Doklam. In Doklam, the local commander decided that enough is enough and put his foot down. Here, our local commanders didn't respond. They caught us napping. When they were exercising, they brought their reserves in. We were sleeping in Leh. And the ITBP didn't report to the army that the Chinese have come to point 14. They've come to Gogra Post. They've come to Hot Springs. They've taken fingers. So fingers, this is what I can't understand. How did we miss fingers 8 to fingers 4, because from across the Pangong you can see it. All you need is a pair of good binoculars, and the army is there. So a complete mess up. There's a huge scramble and a cover-up taking place. And the two generals will not say it. I think the military has been derelict to that extent. And we are now scrambling. We don't know what to do.
So okay, so let me bring in a response on that to the two defense experts. Admiral, do you believe? I don't know if you want to use the same words as Mr. Guruswamy, but do you believe there was a failure of intelligence? Can we put it that way?
Well, I'm no one to use a term like that, but if you look up on social media, even civilian amateurs are obtaining satellite pictures, analyzing them, putting them together with the picture on the ground, and they're telling you what's happening on the Chinese side and perhaps on our side also. So if civilian amateurs can piece together the picture, and we've got satellites up, we've got a National Technical Research Organization, NTRO, etc. We've got means of reconnaissance. So how come we did not get to know? Now, as Mohan said, the ITBP is deployed in that sector. There's another major internal issue. The ITBP is a border guarding force. It is supposed to be the first. They are supposed to be the first ones to contact the enemy. Then the army comes in, but they're not under command of the army. Why? Because the Home Ministry will not let them go. And like that, we got 3 or 4 border guarding forces, which are not accountable or under command of the army. But this is a ridiculous situation. I mean, let's get our act right. For how long are we going to have interministerial fights or tough battles of this nature? So if ITBP missed out, our intelligence, I'm sure, must have picked it up. But the problem is with analysis and dissemination. Even earlier, 2611, etc., we did have intelligence, but we went wrong in analysis and disseminating it to the right people. So perhaps this is another instance of the same nature. And by now, I think, without casting aspersions, being surprised has become a habit with us. We got surprised in 47, we got surprised in 65. 71, of course, we were the ones who surprised. 99, we got surprised. So 2611, we got surprised. So somebody should take note of this. Why are we getting surprised? We got huge intelligence resources. Where are they and what are they doing?
The point here,
Yes.
a similar situation in 1967. The Chinese tried to move the fence. They said, this is not the border. Somewhere else, 5 yards away is the border in Natula. And the local commanders decided and acted immediately. The Eastern Army commander didn't run to Delhi to find out what to do. Standard operation procedures were there. The Div commander, General Sagar Singh, decided that he will use force. The co-commander, Lieutenant General Arora, said, yes, do it. And the Eastern Army commander said, let's fly. So they didn't go to Delhi and hang around the babus and the politicians to decide what, because they had standard operating procedures and generals were capable of taking decisions. They took decisions. They hit the Chinese so hard that the Chinese had to, were wondering if they will be left with Chumbi Valley also. Now, that is the standard operating procedure. In Doklam, I'm glad the GOC acted on his own. He didn't wait for Delhi to instruct him. But here something else happened. There's nobody there to take a decision. I don't think the army knew that the guys had come to point 14 because there was an ITBP sector. So, if ITBP, we didn't know when they had taken the Y point in Depsang in 2013. ITBP didn't report it to the army. ITBP reported it to the Home Ministry. It goes up slowly. And the Home Ministry will decide, deputy secretaries and joint secretaries, whether the poor military has to be informed. The military is the cleanup agency which comes in last.
Well, quick question for you. Small detour, Mr. Guruswamy. Sai Krishna writes in saying, Mr. Guruswamy, what Chinese sources of information do you rely on? Do you want to answer that question?
I see open sources. I see what is available in the newspapers. I see what is available on satellites. Because, you know, I can tell you pretty well here how many airfields they have there and what they've got on the airfields. So those pictures are available on Google Maps. I can tell you the closest airfield. I don't have to be a general to do that. I can tell you what they do in Bhutan.
Well, let me take my next question then to the panel one more time. And this is the question of what India's options are right now. Are our options only military? How, in terms of diplomatic options, what do we have? And I also want to put, you know, on the table right now, the fact that China has antagonized or seems to be antagonizing a great number of countries across the world. Australia has made a very strong statement about China. UK has made a strong statement about China. So has the US. Does that work in our favor? And can we leverage India's sort of standing on, you know, in the global arena in this particular situation with China? So I'll take that question again first to the Admiral. Admiral, what are our options according to you at this point? And diplomatically, do you believe India has enough leverage?
Okay, but before that, I keep hopping
Yes,
on this, but I think before that, we need to have a coherent strategy, a China-specific strategy. What are China's possible courses of action and what we intend doing in each course of action? So once we put our heads together and cobble together a strategy of how to deal with China, it will have various dimensions, diplomatic, economic, military, and so on. Then we can reach out to the...
Admiral, do you believe that we don't have that strategy right now?
It doesn't look like it.
Why
China,
so?
since 1995, China has issued 11 defense white papers. And if you read those white papers, they're so clear, there's such clarity in them. They, in fact, tell you what China is going to do next, what they're going to do in South China Sea. Perhaps I haven't read all of them. Perhaps they mentioned somewhere what's going to happen in the Himalayas. China issues a white paper every 2 years. The USA, every president under his own signatures issues a national security strategy. In the UK, the Prime Minister issues a national. In 70 years, nobody's bothered to issue a security strategy or undertake a defense review and see how capable are we and who can we take on and who can't we take on. So that we are not taken by surprise. So putting that aside, if you're going to reach out to the world community and everybody is now turned against China, and we have to shed some of our inhibitions. I think the External Affairs Minister said non-alignment is dead or words to that effect. Then you can't take a free ride. If you want help to counter China, doesn't mean going to war, then you've got to be prepared to do something for other people or the quid pro quo. So if tomorrow China invades Taiwan, somebody might ask you, will you send a brigade to Taiwan? Hello, think about it. I mean, I'm taking it to an extreme, but you've got to be prepared for a quid pro quo. If you want help from the world community, you've got to reach out also. And then you got to think innovatively. What China has done to us via Pakistan, why haven't we done it back to China via many other countries? Vietnam is one. We could have armed them. We could have given them nuclear weapons. We could have given a lot of things. So there is an inherent diffidence and, stepping back, no strategy, no long-term thinking. And as I said at the beginning, first of all, we must figure out what China is up to. Is it just shifting the LAC little up and down? Is it a bigger game plan? Are they going to walk into Arunachal and take over Aksai Chin, Ladakh? What are they up to? And then how do we counter it? And then how do we do it? What are our options? Our options are pretty limited with COVID on our head, with our economy going down the tube. So we need help and we need to reach out and form alliances, friendships, partnerships.
General Mehta, same question. What are India's options right now on the table?
Yeah, may I just go back briefly to the point raised about Doklam and Bhutan.
Please.
In 1986, there was the first Chinese intrusion at Sundrong-Chu, the place called Guangdong. And that is a landmark event because next month, on the 20th of August, it will be the 25th anniversary of that withdrawal. That withdrawal took 9 years to negotiate. For 9 years, the intrusion stayed in place. And the Indian Army and the Air Force acted with great alacrity, And the response of local commanders was stupendous. So much so that the Chinese pleaded in 1986-87 for withdrawal, but the Indian army refused. We refused to let them to agree to a withdrawal, and we proposed something that they disagreed to. In any case, the lessons of Sumdrong Chu surpassed anything that has happened in 67 with firearms. This was without firearms, and subsequently again at Doklam. But unfortunately, unlike the Chinese, we don't study our past. And the lapses that have been enumerated about intelligence operations, I think they are well made, and there is absolutely no doubt that the army and the ITBP, they failed, and the intelligence agencies failed very badly. And the Chinese have succeeded. They have imposed costs already. They have forced us to deploy 3 additional divisions along this 250-kilometer stretch, including a full brigade at Daulat Beg Oldi with tanks, artillery, etc. And 3 divisions is something like 30,000 troops. We already have a division manning the main defenses, which are about 60 to 80 kilometers behind on the Ladakh and Pangong ranges. Those are the main defenses. The Chinese have made us come 60 to 80 kilometers forward on the line of actual control. To maintain these 3 divisions through winter, and God forbid if this goes the Sumdrong Chu route, then we are in very serious trouble. The Chinese have to do nothing more. They've already done it. They've shifted the LAC, they've dug down, and they have made us deploy. In fact, they have turned the LAC into an LOC. So what more damage could the Chinese have done? Now to come back to your question about options, I cannot see any military option. Absolutely, with 3 divisions deployed in front, with a lot of artillery, with a lot of tanks and other force multipliers deployed, we have no resources at the moment to evict these intrusions. In fact, we are literally pleading the Chinese to negotiate a disengagement, and they won't do it. And therefore, I think the choices that are before us are very stark, very bleak. And those choices will reflect the image and self-esteem of this country. The Indians, or the great Indian nation, has been unable to vacate the aggression committed by the Chinese. If that is the end result, then the self-esteem of India in the eyes of our neighbors, in the international, the Americans can keep saying, oh, India has stood up to the Chinese. That's all very well. Of course, we have stood up to the Chinese, but what next? We can't coerce them the way they can coerce us, because we have no conventional deterrent. And therefore, our choice is diplomacy. We should not accept what the Chinese are going to present to us, a second fait accompli, which is a buffer zone, a DMZ with restrictions on patrolling, with territories that they have grabbed, and with defense fortifications that they have constructed. They would have achieved their objective, and I must add here that these, as I said in the beginning, the military commanders can't work this out. The working mechanism for coordination and withdrawal by the civilians at the level of joint secretaries. I mean, come on, we must be joking. This has to be elevated minimum to the level of National Security Advisor and his counterpart, Wang Yi.
But hasn't it been done, General Saab, so far?
Oh, but this is not good enough because we are telling our MES spokesperson is telling the Chinese, look, the NSA and Wang Yi have agreed to disengagement. The Chinese are saying we have disengaged, period. Because in their concept, we did not insist ab initio, we did not front load this question of returning to original position, status quo ante. That should have been the start point. We did not do that. We got into this trickery of the Chinese of disengagement, buffer zones, and de-escalation. The whole process is broken down.
But General Saab, why do you believe that militarily we don't have any options? I mean,
because we have limited numbers. We have already sucked in our reserves from other sectors. 3 divisions are deployed forward of our main defenses. Previously, we only had the ITBP and the Ladakh Scouts. There were roughly 2,000.
The Admiral said that it's not a matter of headcount. In my first question to him, which China apparently allegedly has 40,000 at the border, we have 20,000. He said it's not really a matter of headcount.
No, in fact, that number, the Chinese have 4 to 5 combined arms brigade, elements of combined armed brigades, which works out to actually 20 to 30,000. We have a mirror deployment. So we have put against that 30,000, we've also put 30,000 up front. And so we are locked in this confrontation, troops versus troops. Now to do something, to evict that intrusion or to vacate the aggression, you need troops. You don't have troops. You can't do Gogia Pasha or something like that. You have to actually, you have infantry to evict these, evict the intrusions and escalate. The government of India doesn't want escalation. You do not want a shooting war, and you do not war at all. So what are your options? Your choices are simply to negotiate, and unfortunately, from a position of weakness.
Okay, let me just quickly, before I bring in Mr. Guruswamy, take that question back to the Admiral. Admiral, do you want to comment on this, on what General Saab has just said?
No, not really, but he's got a point. I mean, if you want to attack, then obviously the army says you need 3-1 superiority over your adversary. So you obviously with 20,000 troops, you can't fight 40,000. What I was saying was that in case they try something, then you can strike at a point, you use air power, you use missiles, you got whatever else you got, you like a blitzkrieg. So you can deter them even with smaller numbers. That's all I was saying. But if it's going to be an all-out conflict, then obviously you need equal or superior numbers to push them back.
Mr. Guruswamy, what is your answer to the question of what India's options are right now? And I was actually saving a question for Ajay Shukla, but I don't think he's going to join us this evening, about our government's communication so far. And he constantly stood by the point of the fact that the Indian government was not being fully honest about what's going on at the LAC or what our position was at the LAC. So I'm going to take that question to you. Given where we are at this point, what are our options?
I'm very well, after listening to General Mehta, I'm very concerned. If you've got a brigade sitting in Daulatbeg only, you've got a hostage sitting there. It's not a good situation. We're getting into this numbers mirror matching game in terrain which doesn't suit you. What suits you is escalation and take it up to the air. And you have no other option. But if you start inserting people there, then you'll be stuck with the problem of defending all those people and protecting them, supplying them, looking after them. And of course, the government has been dishonest with us. Governments are always dishonest. They're trying to tide over a situation. That's their job. They're trying to tell the country that, we are taking care of this and we'll sort these guys out. We've got our mirchi and nimbu tied to our fighters, so we are okay. But it's not going to work, You got to show that you're capable of deterrence, you're capable of escalating to a higher level of violence. You want to convince the Chinese of that? Yeah, you're looking, on one side you're looking worried, you're saying, disengage. I know I'm told that when the co-commander met the Chinese equivalent for the first time, the Chinese basic position was that, what are you asking us to withdraw from? Your prime minister says you've not taken anything. So, even now, if this disengagement, we're disengaging back into our own terrain. If you're disengaging from point 14 in Galwan, then you're disengaging back from what you were holding before.
So, Faye, I think you
Yes.
were absolutely right in the beginning that all this, what the government is doing, this construction of the temple in Ayodhya and all other things, I cannot see, because they want to, this is a diversionary strategy to take away this conversation not taking place between WMCC, the counterparts and the military commander suits the government. The government wants the focus to be shifted from the LAC to something else, to Rajasthan, to construction of temple, celebrating 5th August, reading down Article 370, because those are apparently their triumphs, their political triumphs. But if you point out the LAC, what happens to the 56-inch chhati of Mr. Modi? Because this puts the government in not in good light, because we have two standards. One standard against Pakistan, we do a Balakot with our mirages, and with China, we are only asking for disengagement, and they don't agree with your disengage. Two standards of response. Pakistan, we are very tough. And with China, we are very meek and timid. So there's a problem. And the government doesn't want a conflict between the Balakot and the timidity, and therefore shifts the focus from the LAC to anything else. And what better than making, while China becomes, and I think this is the first time I agree with what Rahul Gandhi has said, while China is becoming a world power, we are becoming a Hindu Rashtra. I think he's absolutely right. And we celebrate 5 Rafales. And as Guruswamy said, कि वो मिर्ची और नींबू लगा दिया उसके ऊपर, पूजा कर दिया, तो उसके साथ 5 रफेल ठीक है, हम टेनिस में नहीं हारेंगे, लेकिन अब ये रफेल्स कब तक ऑपरेशनलाइज होंगे? So, we are clutching at claws at the moment, which reflects our weakness. And that is what the government strategy is: divert, unfortunately.
I must say for Jawaharlal Nehru, they had a forward policy. The problem with that forward policy was you didn't have the military means to support it. Now you have military means, but no policy.
No policy. Let me actually just reframe this question for Admiral Prakash as well. Admiral, would you agree, first of all, that our issues at the LAC with China is the most important thing that's happening right now, if we were to prioritize all of the conversations that are taking place in the country? Secondly, you did mention the fact that we have made a habit of being surprised by China. What do you think?
By China, by everybody.
What do you think it would take for us to become proactive or instead of being reactive? Because it always seems like, we're waiting, we only react after China sort of takes an aggressive stance or takes that first step. So I want to understand, what do you think it's going to take for India to switch sides? and become the more proactive party in this relationship?
Well, the intensity of politics in India has been such that every politician is totally engrossed in electioneering, in constituency, in forming governments, etc. You can see it now. Even now, the focus is on elections, uh, with the result that national security always takes a backseat. And why this? What's happening on our northern borders? Why has it happened? Because we have failed to deter China. Deterrence has failed. China has assessed us, taken a good hard look at us, and realized that there's very little we'll be able to do if they barge in. They've done that. So deterrence has failed. There is a political indifference to national security. Otherwise, why would the Raksha Mantri of the country go rushing to Moscow looking for fighters when the enemy is at our gates? Why are we buying 8.5 lakh rifles from Czechoslovakia? Why are we looking for 2 lakh bulletproof jackets? Now I believe the army is shopping for light tanks. So these all speak of indifference to national security. जब time आएगा तो देखेंगे फौज के लिए जो चाहिए जरूरत है देंगे. You don't supply hardware at the time of war. You provide for contingencies years ahead. The the defense budget is at its lowest in many years. As I told you, there's no national security strategy. Nobody's thought about it. So other people are not stupid or blind. They see what is your state of affairs. So to make sure that these things, the surprise doesn't happen over and over again, you got to, pull your socks up. Look at national security, and national security is the number one priority of any state. If the state doesn't exist, then what are we here for? So winning elections is important, yes, for the survival of a political party. But for the survival of a state, national security must. Defense budget, they say that the first charge on the budget is that of national defense. But people don't seem to think so. Intelligence has to be boosted up. You have to get your priorities right. If your border guarding forces report to Home Ministry, intelligence reports to God knows who, and the armed forces are always taken by surprise, you got to adopt a whole of government approach to these things. You got to synergize. We can't live in stovepipes. For 70 years, we've lived in stovepipes. On the 31st of December, we heard that there's going to be defense reforms. Unfortunately, we got overtaken by COVID and the Chinese and so on. Your earlier question was which crisis is worse. I'm afraid I can't decide because we've got COVID-19, which is a health pandemic never seen before. We really don't know how to cope with it. We don't know what it's going to do. Next, we got an economic crisis. The economy was already sliding. Now it's badly hit. And now we got a national security crisis. They're all equally important. And we got to sit down and think with a cool head. And strategize. Strategize.
There is an indifference towards national security. And if I may, we do have an extremely nationalist government that's constantly talking about how aggressive we are on the border with Pakistan and how hard we have responded. Our defense minister has said that not an inch of Indian land will be conceded at all in his last comment in Ladakh. Do you believe then that these are just comments and we should actually look at the evidence on the ground?
No, that's the supreme irony that we have a nationalist government and a strong government, and everybody had high hopes. But once again, they have allowed politics to take priority over national security, and whatever has happened on the national security front has been used for political mileage, to put it neatly. And this business of not defending every inch of territory, etc., is now passé. You cannot defend. You're tying down your armed forces by saying defend every inch of territory. That doesn't make any sense. Those are all rhetorical. Passing a bill in parliament and saying we'll take back everything, we'll recover POK, etc. I mean, in the 21st century, nobody's going to yield any territory to you. So you need to come down on earth and see what is the best way forward so that your resources are devoted to national development, social uplift, etc., and not wasted, our attention and resources diverted to these national security issues.
Well, this question has popped up from our audience many times, so I'm going to ask it. The 5 Rafale planes that arrived this week, which are being widely celebrated across the country, what sort of a difference will it make to our ability to defend our territory? Admiral?
Well, the Rafale is a modern fifth generation aircraft, very potent, etc. But 5 Rafale will not make any difference to anything. And even 36 Rafale or one full squadron of Rafale, when it comes, will take some time to get up to speed, how to deploy, employ, get your logistics chain in place, etc. I have introduced a new aircraft into the Navy when I was a squadron commander. It took us anything from 3 to 6 months to get to nuts and bolts. So the arrival of 5 aircraft in Ambala means very little. It's good publicity, etc. But let's not get carried away. It will take some time for the Indian Air Force to get used to this new aircraft and employ it as a potent weapon, which it happens to be.
General sir, your comments on the 5 Rafales or the 36 that are to arrive?
So I won't add to what the Admiral has said, Arun has said, because the rest of the 36 are going to come by the end of 2021. And to operationalize a squadron takes anything from 6 to 8 months. And in any case, the question is, it's good for morale of the Air Force, because the Air Force against its 42 squadrons is down to 30 squadrons. And it'll go, and the Pakistanis are at 27, and we will go down to 27 in case we don't get our 114, the RFP that we've sent out for 114 modern fourth generation fighters. If that doesn't materialize, 3 years have passed, nothing has happened. It took 17 years, almost 17 years for the 4.5 generation Rafales to materialize. So you can see the lethargic pace at which our defense acquisition takes place. And therefore our deterrent doesn't seem to move at all. And a lot has been said about this government's defense policy. I think, and I've said this before, they are very smart in conversation, a lot of lip service, send ministers to tie Rakhis, soldiers in Siachen, OROP, National War Memorial. But look at the defense budget, 1.6%, the lowest ever, not in the last 10 years, but the lowest in real terms. And just look at the fiscal allocation, take the Air Force. The Air Force, this year's modernization budget, they've been given 43,000 crore for this year's modernized, just the Air Force.
Yes.
And the Air Force has a carryover liability, which means they already have contracts, previous contracts for which they have to pay 47,000 crores. So where are we? We are nowhere. So when the Prime Minister speaks at Leh about defense, nobody does an inquisition about the actual monies that come to defense. Yeah, I think he made there was an error of judgment in one rank, one pension, because one rank, one pension amount is more than the modernization budget. So there is the big irony today.
Yes.
I am a beneficiary of the one rank, one pension, but I wish this hadn't been done because there's no money for defense modernization. But
right. So let me just take that question also to Mr. Guruswamy. Mr. Guruswamy, the truth is that acquisition of of aircraft and of modern machinery in the defense had slowed down to almost nothing. There was no movement. The arms of our defense were starving for new equipment. They were struggling with what they had. So the fact that the Rafale deal was sped up through the system could be considered a good thing, Mr. Guruswamy.
Yeah, it's a good thing. You got a new plane, but question is how much did you pay for it? There are a lot of questions on this Rafale. How much did it cost? Why is it costing so much? The difference in price between the 126 and for the 36 is essentially the same plane. No difference. Same India specs. Is almost 800 crores a piece.
1,800.
And and why 36? 6 and 3 is 9. Minimum you would need is 5 or 6 squadrons if you want to make any sense out of it. And you already got 280 Sukhois, you got 80 MiG-29s. So, you built up and you got a Sukhoi factory, you got an assembly plant. And why aren't you producing enough Tejas? HAL is now saying we will give you maximum at full lick 12 a year. So they will complete this whole process in 20 years. You can't have a country preparing to fight 2 enemies and saying that I'm a world power with nothing, where you can't even produce a rifle anymore. So now we are scrambling all over the world to buy rifles. We got a new rifle factory, incidentally, in Amethi. And suddenly the military decides that that rifle is too expensive. So why did you put the factory there? And if you go to an ordnance factory, you will be shocked to see what kind of machines, what kind of people they've got there running those things. The Indian Ordnance Factory Board is worse than any other purchase department in the government of India or in any state government. It's a den of corruption. 2 IOFP chairmen are now being pursued by the CBI. There's no, and they produce this Ashok Tata trucks, which go from Pune to Jabalpur in kits. Tatas give it to them at 8 or 9 lakhs a piece. And then the vehicles factory gives it to the army at about 16, 17 lakhs a piece. This utter lack of production and productivity there, and a huge establishment sitting there, not producing anything. These are things you need to sort out. And it will take, like the generals will know, take 10, 15 years to sort these things out. We haven't produced a tank for a long tank. Even small countries are producing tanks. Even Pakistan is producing a tank. We can produce a tank. They've called that tank something Al Khalid or something. They've got some tank coming out. And we don't have a tank. We have a huge big factory in Avadi. It has not produced a single tank. We have an APC factory in Medak. Hasn't produced a single armored personnel carrier for a long time. So we've got a defense production setup for which no white paper is written, no Raksha Mantri directive to the armed forces. He's supposed to give a directive every year to tell these gentlemen what to do. And these are the threats I see, and these are the challenges I see, and this is what I want you to do. They haven't issued one since 1969 or something like that. So, the poor politicians and bureaucrats don't know what to write. They come for 2-year tenures in the defense ministry, some IAS guy who does not know the difference between a rifle and a gun. And he's going to give you directives. And poor ministers, we expect them to write any directive.
Yes.
Give it to them. So I think, we have serious difficulty on all these things.
Right.
So Corona was going to go with thalis and, flashing lights. Then you think that, Chinese also go away this way. Incidentally, there's a Rafale Gutka now available in Kanpur.
All right, we're going to leave it there. I want to thank my panelists for being so
Just
generous.
one small correction to
Yes.
what Mr. Guruswamy said.
Yes,
The
Admiral.
Raksha Mantri's op directive is issued every 2 years. And
Okay.
it's been going on. So it's not so far back as 1969. It is issued quite regularly.
And Admiral, what is the difference between the ops directive and the strategy that you were talking about that we need to have for national security?
Ops directive is what it means. It's valid only for a year or so, for a short, immediate future. But the strategy looks at 5, 10, 15 years, maybe 50 years. And it's that's at the national level. Ops
Okay.
directive is only for the 3 armed forces.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for helping us understand this better. So obviously it boils down to the fact that as our panelists have pointed out, that we need to have a strong, clear national security directive or a strategy that stretches over many decades to give everybody direction as to how we're dealing with various neighbors and various threats to national security. And our panelists have also pointed out that we're suffering from an indifference to national security, which we need to change. The manner in which we acquire, produce, and arm our military and the three arms of our forces, and how we're able to prioritize national security over the other things, including politics and elections that take place in our country. We'll continue to keep an eye on this because, like it's been pointed out, COVID, which is our health crisis at this point, the economy and national security are the three top priorities, at least for me as well, as far as discussions that we have. To our audience, we are not going to be discussing the mandir. There are enough of people doing that. It's not specifically an area of interest, and I don't believe it's something that affects our lives. We're going to focus on things that affect our lives, which include the health crisis, the economic crisis, and what's happening with national security. Again, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. Thank you to our audience, also to those who supported us financially, Sai Krishna, Tanvi, and Dips. We do hope you'll come back tomorrow as well at 8 p.m. We'll do an AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything, and I'll be here. Please make it a point to share this video with as many people as you can, to let them know, to also pass on the information that these three gentlemen have shared with us this evening. Let them know to also like and subscribe to the channel so they know when we go live every evening at 8 o'clock. Thank you for watching. Good night.